Welcome to War Bios, where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, examining the strategic context, operational art, and human cost of war. Today, we're going to explore one of the most decisive battles of World War I, the Battle of Tannenberg. This clash between German and Russian forces in August 1914 would prove to be a turning point on the Eastern Front, showcasing the brilliance of German tactical innovation and the catastrophic consequences of Russian strategic missteps. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in June 1914 had sparked a chain reaction of diplomatic crises and military mobilizations across Europe. Germany, bound by treaty to Austria-Hungary, found itself facing off against Russia, which was allied with France. The German High Command, led by the venerable Chief of Staff Helmuth von Moltke, knew that a two-front war would be disastrous, and so they focused on quickly defeating one enemy before turning to face the other. The summer of 1914 was marked by an eerie sense of anticipation as the great powers of Europe mobilized their armies and prepared for the inevitable conflict. In the East, the Russian Empire, with its vast resources and manpower, posed a significant threat to German territory. The Russians had been modernizing their military, adopting new technologies and tactics, but their command structure remained cumbersome and prone to indecision. Meanwhile, the German Eighth Army, led by General Maximilian von Prittwitz, was tasked with defending East Prussia against the advancing Russian forces. As the Russians began their invasion of East Prussia in early August 1914, they split their forces into two armies, the First Army under General Paul von Rennenkampf and the Second Army under General Alexander Samsonov. This division would prove fateful, as it allowed the Germans to exploit the gap between the two Russian armies. In the days leading up to the Battle of Tannenberg, General von Prittwitz found himself facing intense pressure from his superiors in Berlin, who were growing increasingly anxious about the Russian advance. The German Eighth Army was outnumbered and outgunned, but von Prittwitz had a secret weapon, his chief of operations, Lieutenant Colonel Max Hoffmann, a brilliant tactician with a deep understanding of the Russian military. Hoffmann would play a crucial role in shaping the German response to the Russian invasion, using his knowledge of the terrain and the enemy's dispositions to devise a bold plan that would ultimately decide the outcome of the battle. As the Russian armies closed in on East Prussia, their commanders were confident of victory, but they were also wary of the Germans' reputation for tactical cunning. The Russians had been monitoring German military maneuvers for years, studying their use of rapid mobilization, encirclement tactics, and artillery firepower. Yet, despite this knowledge, the Russians would soon find themselves facing a German army that was more agile, more adaptable, and more ruthless than they had ever imagined. The Russian First Army, led by General von Rennenkampf, was a formidable force, with over 200,000 soldiers and hundreds of artillery pieces. But as they marched towards East Prussia, they were slowed down by the treacherous terrain and the lack of reliable intelligence on the German army's dispositions. Meanwhile, the Russian Second Army, led by General Samsonov, was struggling to keep pace with the First Army, their communications disrupted by the Germans' clever use of radio jamming and sabotage. As the Russian armies continued their relentless advance into East Prussia, the German Eighth Army, led by General von Prittwitz, found itself facing an existential crisis. The Russians, bolstered by their numerical superiority and fueled by a sense of imperial ambition, seemed unstoppable as they poured across the border like a tidal wave. It was against this backdrop of chaos and uncertainty that Lieutenant Colonel Max Hoffmann, the brilliant and unorthodox Chief of Staff, devised a bold plan to stem the Russian tide. On August 23, 1914, the Germans launched a series of probing attacks against the Russian First Army, led by General von Rennenkampf, near the town of Gumbinnen. The air was thick with tension as the two armies clashed in a frenzy of artillery fire and rifle shots, the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging heavy over the battlefield like a malignant specter. Despite being outnumbered, the Germans held their ground with dogged determination, inflicting significant casualties on the Russian forces and sending a clear message that they would not be easily intimidated. However, the real turning point of the battle came on August 25, 1914, when General von Prittwitz, under intense pressure from his superiors in Berlin, ordered a general retreat to the Vistula River. This decision was met with dismay and incredulity by Lieutenant Colonel Hoffmann, who realized that such a retreat would abandon the strategic initiative to the Russians and allow them to occupy the entire province of East Prussia. Hoffmann's concerns were validated when the Russian Second Army, led by General Samsonov, began to close in on the German rear guard, threatening to encircle and destroy the Eighth Army. As the German army teetered on the brink of disaster, Hoffmann's instincts as a seasoned tactician kicked into high gear. He knew that the key to victory lay not in retreating, but in seizing the initiative and striking back at the Russians with all the ferocity at his disposal. In a daring move, Hoffmann convinced von Prittwitz to reverse his decision and instead launch a counterattack against the Russian Second Army. The die had been cast, and the fate of East Prussia hung precariously in the balance. On August 26, 1914, the Germans launched a surprise attack on the Russian Second Army near the town of Frugenau, catching them off guard and inflicting heavy casualties. The Russians were quickly thrown into disarray, their command structure beginning to break down as panic set in. General Samsonov's situation was rapidly becoming desperate, his army encircled and his men running low on food, water, and ammunition. The once proud Russian army was now on the verge of collapse, its soldiers fleeing in terror as the Germans closed in for the kill. The Battle of Tannenberg, a pivotal clash that would etch its name in the annals of military history, forever changing the trajectory of World War I on the Eastern Front. As the German army closed in on the Russian Second Army, General Samsonov's situation grew increasingly desperate, like a commander standing atop a crumbling parapet, gazing out upon a sea of uncertainty. On August 29, 1914, with the weight of his army's fate bearing down upon him, General Samsonov ordered a general retreat. But alas, it was too late. The Germans had already encircled his army, like a noose tightening around the neck of a condemned man. The Russian soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, stumbled through the treacherous terrain, their stomachs empty, their canteens dry, and their ammunition dwindling. The once mighty Second Army was now on the brink of collapse, its men succumbing to the crushing pressure of the German onslaught. As the battle raged on, the sounds of war filled the air, the staccato bursts of machine gun fire, the thunderous boom of artillery, and the anguished cries of the wounded. The Russian lines wavered, then broke like a dam breached by a raging torrent. The Germans, sensing victory within their grasp, pressed their advantage, driving deep into the heart of the Russian army. In the end, it was a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Over 90,000 Russian soldiers taken prisoner, tens of thousands more killed or wounded, and General Samsonov himself vanished, his fate a mystery that would haunt the Russian army for years to come. The Second Army had been annihilated, its remnants scattered like autumn leaves before a gust of wind. The Battle of Tannenberg was a crushing defeat for the Russian army, a blow from which it would never fully recover. It marked a significant turning point in the war on the Eastern Front, as the Germans, emboldened by their victory, pushed deep into Russian territory, capturing key cities and inflicting heavy casualties on the Russian army. As General Paul von Hindenburg, the German commander, would later reflect, the Battle of Tannenberg was a great victory, one that would be remembered for generations to come. The German army, under the leadership of Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff, had executed a brilliant encirclement, using their superior mobility and intelligence to outmaneuver the Russians. The battle would become legendary in German military circles, a symbol of the country's martial prowess and a reminder of its ability to overcome even the most daunting challenges. Military historians and strategists around the world would study the tactics and techniques employed by the German army during the battle, seeking to learn from their successes and failures. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography, reminding you to keep marching toward victory,